Welcome back to the fourth session of this second block. In it, we will talk about the three main schools of management when it comes to urban infrastructures. These schools are the public management school, what we call the new public management school, the market approach, and I would like to talk at the end of this presentation also about a new phenomenon called PPPs, or public-private partnerships, which has become one of the important ways to manage urban infrastructures. So let's start first with public management. Public management goes together with, you remember in the first block, I talked about the different intellectually coherent approaches to looking at urban infrastructure systems. The public management approach goes together with the public policy approach. Basically, what you have is an integrated municipal infrastructure which both has the infrastructure and the services that it provides. And this is owned basically by the municipality, by the city. It's an operator of the infrastructure and the services owned by the municipal authorities. And this operator, the water operator, the energy operator, the gas operator, the electricity operator, the telecom operator, the public transport operator, sometimes even cable TV and things like that, is primarily serving the citizens. Of course, they are also customers, but we are in the public policy approach. So really, the focus is serving the citizens. Now, this operator is commanded and controlled by the municipal government. It is owned by the municipal government. The municipal government decides how it is basically managed. That's why it's called public management. If the services this operator provides is not satisfactory, the idea goes that the citizens, by virtue of a political process, will have an influence on the municipal government. Even they will vote them out of office, or they will explain to the political authorities that they are not happy with the services. And then the municipal government will influence on the way the infrastructure operator is doing its job, and even maybe change the directors or the managers of this operator. So the public management approach is coherent in its own right. It stems from a time where an urban infrastructure services are mainly monopolistic, where everything is under control of the political authorities. Is still the case in many countries, and this model still operates in many situations. Now, let's move to something that has become called the new public management, and I would say that is the widespread model that we have, at least in the industrialized the northern countries, and basically what we have here, it's a slight change to the previous public management model. We still have an integrated municipal operator, water, energy, transport, you name it, that does the infrastructure and the services, but it has a certain degree of autonomy from the political authorities. And the main focus of that operator is now the customer, not necessarily the citizens. The idea is that it operates like a private company. It is totally publicly owned, but it operates like a private company and needs some autonomy to do that. The main idea behind this is that there is a separation between production of services and provision of services. The autonomized entity is in charge of producing the services. The political authority is in charge of providing the services. Now here you see that this entity, and basically in between the political authorities in charge of responsible for providing the services, and the operator in charge of producing the services, we have now professional management, not political management like in the previous school of thought, but professional management. Again, if the customers, which also happen to be citizens, are not satisfied with the services, they will let it be known to the political authorities, which will then change the professional management, which will then change the way the infrastructure services are provided. So it is somehow different with the public management approach, but it's still a continuation of the public management approach, basically by saying that the services become more professional, that the customer is the first focus, and by making this distinction between production and provision. Now let's go to markets. So this market-based approach, as the PPP approach that we will talk about a little later, is basically in line with the approach I have presented in the last block, which is called the public economy approach. So there is a provision, there is an operator that produces the infrastructure services, the water services, the energy services, the transportation services, and this producer of the services is either privatized, it's a private operator, or it's corporatized. That means it is a shareholding company which can belong to the public authorities of that city or of any other city. And things can be unbundled in the sense that the infrastructure may remain owned by the municipality. The provision of the infrastructure may be in the ownership of the private operator. But the basic focus here is the customer. The service, this is supposed to be an entity that operates like any private company that is serving the customers. Okay. Now, here, the main mechanism to attribute the mandate to produce is competition or tendering. We have already seen in the last block that because of economic reasons, we deal with monopoly, so you cannot always create competition. You can, for example, create competition between transport operators in a city, but you cannot really create competition in the market among water companies. So basically what you do is you create competition, what is called for the market. You tender the services. You make a call and you ask the companies to offer their services, and then you choose the best, which has either the best price, the best quality, depending on a series of criteria, and the public authorities choose which of the operators is going to be providing these services. Now, this is, of course, regulated. Once you have privatized, autonomized the services, there is a regulation of these services, and there is also, of course, a regulation of the tendering process to make sure you actually obtain the best services possible. The political authorities control all this. The municipal government controls all this basically by defining the regulation, by defining the tendering procedures, and by defining the criteria against which the producer obtains the contract to operate. The control mechanism is political control mechanism is still the same in that the citizens choose the municipal government, but the link between the citizens and the customers is a little bit more tenuous one. It's not the customer that directly influences the city. The customer is supposed to communicate directly with the operator whether he or she is satisfied with the services. Now, another version, a more, I would say, more modern or more adapted version today to the market approach is what we call public-private partnerships. This has become a dominant model, I would say, in public transport on the one hand, and in wastewater services on the other. So basically, we have, again, a privatized or corporatized entity that produces the services, and this entity is related to the customer. Now, this entity contracts with the public authorities. Generally, like in the market model, the contract is tendered. That is, there is a competition for that contract, something we call the PPP, Public-Private Partnership contract, between an operator and the municipal authority, the municipal government that basically decides what kind of services it wants, how much it is prepared to pay for these services, and in what quality it wants these services. Tendered, the contracts are tendered, and we saw before that tendering procedures are regulated. And then basically the citizens influence the government that contracts and the customers are in relationship with the operator that provides the services. This is the basic PPP mechanism. Now let me briefly explain two more things. There are two types of PPPs, and it's important to understand the nature of those. The first are called management PPPs. These PPPs apply in the case that the urban infrastructure exists. Basically, doesn't need rehabilitation or big investments. So we see a lot of management PPPs in the case of public transport, because the road infrastructure, you will not ask the bus operating company to invest into the roads. So basically here, the municipal government tenders a management PPP, let's say to a private bus operator, which can be an entity that is owned by another municipality but offering the services in this municipality. There are, simply said, three types of contracts. There are management contracts, lease contracts, and concessions. The difference is in terms of the length of the contract. Management contracts typically between 1 and 4 years, lease contract between 4 and 15 years, concession contracts longer than 15 years. This again relates, of course, to the economics and also to the politics of it. The shorter the contract, the more control by the municipal authority. But the longer the contract, the more economic sense that it makes, because you can acquire efficiency gains during the lifetime of the contract. And of course, it also depends very much on the technology that is behind it. So water contracts, water and sewerage contracts are in general longer term contracts than public transport contracts. Now, in the case that the infrastructure is very deficient or doesn't even exist and needs to be rehabilitated before you can actually produce a service, or needs even to be built before you can produce a service, in this case, we use something that is called financial PPPs. And this means that the private operator that will produce the services will put up the money. It's not the public authority that builds the water treatment plant or the sewerage treatment plant or the waste management facility. It's the private operator that puts the money up, then builds it, operates it in the first case, and once it has operated it for a certain period of time, 10, 15, 20 years, it transfers the ownership to the municipal, to the public government, to the public authority, which then comes to own it. More widespread is the second version, in the sense that the private operator builds the water treatment plant, transfers the ownership directly to the municipal government, does not own it any longer, but in exchange receives a management contract, generally a lease contract, 10, 15 years, in order to operate it, and by doing so recuperate the money it has invested into building this infrastructure. So you can see this is, I think this is the widespread model that is becoming more and more widespread worldwide for various reasons, but the main reason is probably technology, the costs of developing the infrastructures, which are increasing. Let's just take one example. This is the water example. Water becoming more and more polluted, the cost of cleaning it, the costs of cleaning it are becoming exorbitant. The municipal authorities don't have the money anymore to invest into these infrastructures and are increasingly recurring to financial PPPs and then management PPPs, so BTO contracts, build, transfer, operate contracts, to operate the urban infrastructures. But here again, we keep the distinction that I made previously in the new public management school between production of the services, which is the operator, the contracted private operator, and provision of the services, which remains the responsibility of the municipal government. That's the provision caters to the citizens, the production caters to the consumers. So in this session, I have given you, those are the three main schools of thought, the PPP being basically a form of market school of thought. These are the schools of thought that currently exist in the management of urban infrastructures. Now, in the next session, we will do an interview with a practitioner who will explain you from a practical side how these things work. And then I will come at the very end of this block and say a few words about the role of the information and communication technologies that are actually substantially changing, if not revolutionizing, the provision of urban infrastructure services.